To bring in from the Athletic, Audrey Snyder. Audrey, it's always great to talk with you.
Hey, Steve. Happy Thursday.
And happy Thursday to you. All right. So it's never a dull moment. So let's get to with Mike Yurcich no longer the offensive coordinator and the changeover. People want to know what direction Penn State could go in at this point. Are you getting any reads from any people along the way, either within the athletic family or yourself, as to potential directions? And did I lose her? I think I lost her. There we are, Audrey. I do hear you again.
Steve, you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, sorry, I don't.
No, something dropped out. I mean, all I did was hit it on the side. It came back. No. So what direction, either from what you hear or somebody else hears, that may be in that sphere of possibility?
For sure, yeah. I've got a list of about 12 candidates up on the Athletic. I think the thing to keep in mind, and you know this, Steve, when it comes especially to coordinator searches, I mean, it really could be just about anyone. To me, there are a few names that make a lot of sense. One of them, of course, is Joe Moorhead at Akron, right? Like, you look at when Penn State's offense was successful under James Franklin, certainly the Moorhead era was that. Now, does he want to do this, right? Like, I think that's the question there, because no doubt about it, that's a phone call that absolutely needs to be made. But does he want to come back to Penn State as a coordinator, or is he more content in an Akron situation that, from the outside looking in, Steve, does not look like it's certainly going well? So you have that, right? And then I think the other one, Tim Cramsey at Memphis, is one that I think is kind of interesting when you look at what their offense has been able to do. Obviously, he's a Pennsylvania native from Allentown, so I do wonder about that. But yeah, I mean, it's a robust list. I think a lot of the last couple days, fans have kind of been hung up on Joe Brady and Ken Dorsey. I wouldn't read too much into that, Steve, because I think people just like the hot name, but to me, there's a reason why Joe Brady in 2019 kind of rode that hot LSU offense into the NFL. Probably because he wants to be there and not in college football. So I think you need to take these things into account, right? Like, it's a totally different world going from coaching in the NFL to coaching college football. It is not for everyone, and I think that's kind of the other part that fans have to keep in mind here.
Yeah, exactly right. It's not for everyone, especially in the current landscape. With NIL and transfer portals, it's not for everyone. That's why you've seen, for example, ask yourself why Roy Williams, Mike Krzyzewski, and Jay Wright aren't coaching basketball any longer. I mean, it's okay. You have to ask that question. Were you surprised at the timing of it as opposed to waiting a couple of weeks?
Yeah, to me the timing was interesting only because we haven't seen James Franklin hire somebody in the middle of the season. Like, that's been the new wrinkle here. But, I mean, I think you look at the way the offense has struggled, and I think you can look at, obviously, the Ohio State game and Michigan game. On the two biggest stages, this unit fell flat. And somebody, I think, after the way the fans responded on Saturday, leaving the stadium, screaming, chanting. There were some Fire Franklin chants coming from the student section. It was a bad scene. I think, honestly, James Franklin heard that, and if his mind wasn't made up at that point, I think maybe that tipped the scales. But yeah, I mean, when you flounder on the biggest stages like that with this offense, something had to change. So I'm not surprised that they made the change. But James said, kind of when you know, and there was no need to prolong that. But kind of the question that I have, and something that I reported, I spoke with their 2025 quarterback commit last night, and he kind of broached the subject and made a point that when he spoke with James Franklin, it certainly sounded like pre-game Saturday that Franklin knew that he was going to part ways with Mike Yurcich. So I've got the story up this afternoon on The Athletic. There's some interesting comments in there, but it, again, raises questions about this timeline.
When you look at the styles of play of Drew, Bo Prabula, and the two known incoming recruits, as you know, I'm in the position I can't say their names. when you look at their respective styles, does that then indicate to you a style of coordinator?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see anything vastly different than what they've been doing, right? Like, It would be absolutely crazy if they went out and got somebody who's not going to be catering to Drew Aller's talents and his build and all those types of things. But where I think this gets interesting, Steve, is you got to remember, Bo Pribula committed to Kirk Shiraka. You know, Drew Aller was Mike Yurcich's guy. Jackson Smolik was Mike Yurcich's guy. So you're going to have a quarterback room with guys who were committed to various programs. And yes, of course, you know, then once the process unfolds, Pribula then ultimately, like, essentially recommits. Yurcich wanted him. Like, I get all of that. But you've got different styles of quarterback in that room, and that gets interesting. So I don't think we're going to see anything vastly different, but you got to make sure that Drew Aller is on board with whatever direction they're going. And that's going to be the storyline coming out of this weekend, because not to overshadow Rutgers, Steve, but I will. You know, that's a storyline this week for sure. But what about your coveted quarterback? Is he okay with where this thing is headed? And I think he is, but that's something that we need a definitive answer from on the record from Drew.
How interested are you to see what Penn State's offense looks like just down the stretch run here? Because you have J1 Snyder and Ty Howell as co-offensive coordinators. How interested to see as to what it looks? Same personnel, but as terms of the look.
Absolutely, very excited to see that. I mean, to me, I think we're going to get a better feel of what they ultimately maybe wanted to do coming into this year, but didn't do or got away from, right? We heard so much about the Bo Pribula package. We saw it once at Maryland. We didn't see it in the two biggest games. Does that stay? I think the T formation is probably here to stay. But also, I mean, I recognize that this is a huge spot for J1 Snyder and for Ty Howell. James Franklin didn't say Wednesday night who specifically will be calling the plays. But this is a huge spot for both of these guys. These are two guys that have, you know, the respect of this coaching staff and also the guys in their meeting rooms. But yeah, to me, I think there also might be, Steve, a little bit of freedom in terms of maybe you're playing with house money a little bit at this point because you've already lost your two biggest games, but you're still in position for a New Year's Six game. You've got two lesser-than opponents to round out the regular season. Like, if anything, this should be a team that's playing really loose at this point, especially after, you know, all that's transpired in the past week. And maybe that's what this group needs, right? Maybe last week they were a little bit too tight with all the pressure, all the eyeballs that were on State College for that game. But yeah, at this point, I think the players also know and are keeping in mind they've got to be auditioning for whoever this next OC is too. So what they put on film really matters from here on out.
It's also Senior Day coming up. Look, running through the tunnel doesn't mean it's the last time you do it. I think the running joke I had with James when I talked to him yesterday was Sean Clifford did it 3 times, and he did it. Sean did it twice. Okay, he didn't do it 3 times, but I exaggerated by 1. So that doesn't mean anything. But are you still interested to see what the list does look like?
You know what? I think we'll eventually see the list. As of right now, I haven't seen one yet as a Thursday afternoon, but I don't think it matters much. And I think, to me, that's the thing. Like, talking with Caden Wallace Wednesday night, he said he's still undecided of whether or not he will come back. I mean, he technically has a 6th year.
Yeah, right? He has a COVID year. Yeah, he has. See, that's the part that's still there for a lot of these guys. They have a COVID year. Like, for example, Curtis Jacobs. He's been essentially a 4-year start. He has a COVID year. I mean, people don't. And that's the part that still hangs there that makes our guessing game a little more difficult.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Caden said he really hadn't given it much thought to whether or not this will be his last time, running onto the field at Beaver Stadium. But yeah, he's one that you kind of forget about. Sal Wormley could be another guy. Yeah. I mean, I know James Franklin has alluded to it before that when he's been asked about the future of the offensive line, he kind of mentioned, well, maybe we get some of these guys, without naming names, back next year. And that's what you have to wonder. I mean, I still think the month of December, you talk about reasons why college coaches want to leave the sport for the NFL. The month of December is crazy because you have to solidify your roster. figure out, especially with these COVID guys, who's staying and who's going, which I feel like at this point the staff probably has a pretty good handle on it. They won't say publicly, but they have a pretty good handle on it. But then, you've got the early signing period coming. Who are you going to go after in the transfer portal? What does that look like? So, yeah, it's going to be madness. But I'm with you, Steve. The Saturday Senior Day moment, it's certainly not what it once was. And I think the other part, too, to remind fans about is Penn State, has never allowed underclassmen who are seemingly going to declare. They've never participated. So, for example, Saquon Barkley never had a senior day because he wasn't a senior. So I think sometimes fans see that and they'll say, oh, well, that guy didn't run out. He must be coming back.
Right.
No, don't read too much into the tunnels these days.
No, you don't. You don't do that. I do have to ask you about the James Madison situation. They have been denied the waiver for the second time. In a sport that needs bowl teams, they're telling an undefeated team no. How do you look at that? Because there are going to be people that argue you can't do anything to Michigan because think of the players, but they have no problem looking at the James Madison players and telling them no.
Yeah, well, Steve, I'll take it a step further because I've kind of been following the James Madison stuff for a while. My brother went out of high school, went to JMU to run cross country. And at that point, they then cut a bunch of their non-revenue sports because they were paving the way for football. So my views on JMU are probably going to be a little skewed, a little biased because of that. But, yeah, no, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, I think the whole bowl system where it is, and that's always been the whole point with the NCAA, right? I mean, we saw it here in 2012. It's what's fair to the players and what isn't, right? We're seeing it at Michigan. You're alluding to it at JMU. And it's tough, and I think it also kind of maybe puts in perspective a little bit when you look at a place like Penn State and people are understandably on edge, but you're still going to have a really good shot at a New Year's Six game.
Right.
And a lot of kids would love that opportunity, It's so interesting how the perception of bowl season has changed over time. But yeah, that's JMU certainly is. They've been interesting to follow, Steve. I will certainly say that just from kind of following them afar. Like, that's a really fascinating fan base. Those people love them some JMU football. But yeah, it's an interesting time in college athletics, to say the least.
Because the argument is that I understand if you still have some scattered FCS programs in there, I can understand that. They only have Bucknell. Yeah, their other non-conference games include Utah State, Virginia. They're playing a full Sun Belt schedule. They're playing literally as many FCS programs at James Madison as Ohio State, Penn State, Alabama, which plays Tennessee Chattanooga this week. They're playing the same number of FBS programs as they are, and yet they're being told no. I know rules are rules, but your thoughts on because to me this was one of those, you can make the ruling and you're going to look good doing it, and they won't do it.
Yeah, Steve, I guess that's why you and I aren't in charge, because then it would probably make a little bit too much sense, right? I just think this is one of those where you look around the room and say, you know what? It'll be great for those kids, and we'll look good doing it. Okay. No, they won't do it. It's crazy. How do you view... Oh, yeah, no, that's...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I feel like that's just kind of where we're at, right? Like, that's the entire landscape. We're trying to make sense of everything and everything as it unfolds. And it's hard, and like you said, if the rules are the rules, but if you can make exception to it, right? If we look at the Michigan thing, then you can make the argument of, well, what does sign stealing actually get you, right? Was it worth a touchdown a game? Obviously, there's the integrity piece. I mean, I was at the Michigan hotel last week, waiting for Jim Harbaugh to arrive because that was the story, and we wanted to get something on the record about that. But you go back to the rules. The rules are the rules, and they're in place for a reason. Even though if sometimes in the JMU case it doesn't look like it makes a lot of sense, Steve, I'm sure someone spent way too much time coming up with these rules to then enforce them.
What was it like at the Wyndham last week? What was that scene like?
Oh, man, it was weird. It was, I was there for probably like 30 minutes, and then eventually everyone got kicked out because Michigan had rented out the entire hotel. So they could kind of pull it's not even open to the public card, like everybody has to get out. You've got people coming off the golf course that are baffled by like what's happening. So never got to put eyeballs on Jim Harbaugh after that. But it certainly was bizarre that State College was the focal point of the college football universe last Friday and Saturday.
What do you think of all this? Because to my knowledge, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, they have never once come out and said, we categorically deny this happened. Right? I have not heard that. I've heard them tell everybody they're the victim. What do you think of all this?
It is one of the most bizarre stories I can ever remember following. I mean, it is just, you look at kind of one layer of it, and then you look at Connor Stallions, and the stories keep getting more bizarre, and, you know, his vacuum service and the homeowners association stuff. Like, it is like, you could not script this. It is absolutely crazy. But yeah, you're right. I mean, again, I haven't followed it as closely as people who cover Michigan, but yeah, to my understanding as well, Steve, they've never come out and said that. I did find it interesting in the post game last week, like the final minutes, I'm down on the field, and there was a Michigan player who had the whiteboard that was on the sideline, and someone had written on the whiteboard, like, don't need to cheat, or don't need to steal or cheat to win. And they were holding this board up in Penn State players' faces, and I saw that, and I'm like, well, that's kind of an admission, right? Like, it's just bizarre. But again, that's coming from a college-age kid writing something in the heat of the moment. But yeah, I don't know what you do long-term with them. Also, like, what is the long-term play for Jim Harbaugh, right? Is he back to the NFL after all of this? Yeah. Maybe, probably, it would seem, just from the outside looking in. But yeah, it's a story, Steve, that I am glad I do not have to cover on a daily basis. I can put it that way.
Yeah, and I will say this though about the whiteboard. What are you showing that to the Penn State players for? There isn't a single Penn State player that accused them of it all week. That's
just bizarre. Yeah.
I mean, like, not one player even said a word about it the entire week. Why? Okay. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of like the whole Michigan against the world type thing, you know?
Yeah. The world the world is reacting. All right. Thank you so much, as always. Great pleasure, Audrey. Great work, as always, and appreciate you very much.
No problem, Steve. Take care.
Thanks. Sir, welcome.
I made it. I'm here.
I knew you would.
The same if I'm not. Yeah, it was a crazy thing about running errands, and just missed the call. But we're good. I'm all set here.
Well, first of all, you are as dependable as a Swiss watch. I mean, really, you are our Rolex.
Never been called a Rolex before. I can hear my dad laughing about that now. That's not the impression he would have given you. I promise you.
I come from a different perspective.
Something I had to learn.
Okay. I come from a different perspective. How about that?
I will make sure the family heard that. They will appreciate it.
Very much so.
I will appreciate it. Thank you.
The bizarre continues to happen. Look, I mean, I expected them to win, but they keep winning. I'll say they also scored on their first drive again, second straight week.
But it was an impressive drive. Might have been their best drive of the season overall. That one against the Rams was pretty good, but the depth and the versatility that they're adding now, I think that above anything else is really the eye-popping thing. Obviously, this is not an offense that you can expect to score, 4 touchdowns a game or anything like that. But they're capable of eating some possession, running some stuff that a defense is not going to be fully prepared for, And I got to say, a large chunk of it seems to me like that the insertion of Broderick Jones at right tackle, the athleticism that he brings, is opening up both their zone and their gap schemes. And the way that they're using that is it's a different wrinkle every week. We're seeing different things when he's in there. I'm not sure if that means you can pin it on either Dan Moore, who we replaced once, or Chuks Okorafor, who he's replacing now. But Jones being in there, you're seeing a high-level athlete playing pretty well in the run game. And that is opening everybody else up. You know, it seems like he's kind of the catalyst. I know how weird that is to say about an offensive lineman, but he's doing stuff that Trent Williams is doing, you know, in San Francisco. And it's a lot of fun to watch. And you're seeing a versatile Steelers running game kind of rising like a phoenix out of the ashes here. They're capable of running the ball. We haven't really said that ever this season, and it took them half the year to get kind of good last year, and they ended the year very effectively. You're seeing that in Pittsburgh now. They have an offensive identity, and with that, they're capable of winning games. I mean, they're probably a little bit better than Green Bay. I don't know by how much better. Kind of like what you alluded to. I don't know how, you know, they should have won this game. This is one that they really needed to win and should have won and did. Probably got a little bit closer than you would have wanted it to be, but the return of Minkah Fitzpatrick, which is imminent, that'll happen eventually, I think is going to fix a lot of things within their secondary. And I don't know how many teams they're going to beat, but I know that they're going to be a very tough team to beat when they have everything going. And I know how cliche that sounds, but they make people beat themselves, you know, and that's really what they did to Green Bay. And it seems like that's going to be their strategy from here on out.
Pat Freiermuth, doors open for him being back. What can he add?
He might even be a bigger return than Minkah in the sense that you're going to have a solid short field receiver who has blocking ability as well. Right now, whatever trio of tight ends they're putting out there, none of them can catch, and none of them are particularly good run blockers to this point. Freiermuth is going to be better than all of them in all of that. But the experience that you're getting with Washington, with Hayward, with Williams when he's in there, you're going to have a nice, you know, assortment of tight end packages that you can run within this, you know, increasingly versatile ground game. And Freiermuth can catch the ball. You know, this is, you know, Pickett completed 14 passes last week. This is like 1983 football. A solid seam target can open up, you know, that infamous 13 to 18 yard range as far as the passing game goes. It's going to expand their RPO game, which is almost non-existent at this point. There's a lot of things Freiermuth is going to bring upon his return, and I would argue that they have not had him pretty much all season. He's been out there, he's been dressed, he's caught a ball or two, but they haven't had the peak Pat Freiermuth, the guy that you expected to get 100 targets this season for the Steelers. When you have that in there, it's a better receiving option, I think, overall, certainly in the short space, than what they've been able to manufacture. And when you get that RPO game going, those pop passes over the middle, the seam stuff down the middle, that opens stuff up on the outside, and I think the offense is going to be able to push back on a defense a little bit more than just playing the kind of swinging gate thing that they've been doing, particularly in the passing game.
Okay, Johnson being back in the lineup, what has that meant? You and I talked about this last week because he's actually as inconsistent as I personally think he is, he's still a better player at this stage than Pickens. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I expected more, I guess, from Johnson. And to be fair, you kind of have to grade both Johnson and Pickens on a bit of a curve because the passing game is just a mess. I mean, we're not seeing every game. Pickett is missing open targets consistently. You know, it's he's completing 14. He's missing on 9, and of those 9 incompletions, I honestly feel like 4 or 5 of them a game are just simply bad throws,
right.
Passes that should have been completed. Johnson's going to feel the effects of that. Certainly statistically, his impact on the game is not present at all. He had 1 catch. You know, that's not, in my opinion, it's not because Johnson can't get open. He's able to get open. They're not scheming their receivers open enough. I don't. That's the major criticism that I would have of the offense. They don't work. They don't do enough to get the receivers running in concert with one another, running combo routes, things of that nature to let your receivers try to make a play. Mm-hmm. They're just kind of throwing them in one place, take it or leave it. They're not doing anything with them to try to open them up. And your quarterback is not throwing the ball accurately enough for yards after the catch. And we've talked about this the last 3 years. The ball isn't going in a place where the receiver can catch it and turn and run. They're not open enough, which you might put on them. But some of that is a late delivery from a mid arm strength quarterback. They're not being put in position to succeed as much. I think because of that, Johnson is not the impact player that I thought he would be. We'll see, though. I think there are some, probably some miscommunication, some inability against Green Bay that we didn't quite anticipate. We'll see what happens against a vastly better defense in Cleveland. Not that Green Bay has a bad defense, but Cleveland's is really good. They're going to have to get Johnson the ball if they want to be consistent in running it the way that you have to assume that they're going to. There's going to be plays that Pickett is going to have to deliver a good pass to Johnson, who's going to have to get open. They're going to have to make plays after the catch as well. There's a lot riding on Johnson going into this game, but as far as a comparison to him and Pickens, it's not even close. I mean, Johnson is a pro. He's got 400 some odd targets more than Pickens does in his career, and that gap is probably going to continue to expand because Pickens, he's not nuanced enough yet as a route runner. He's not all that hard to cover. It's great that he can make the highlight reel catches and everything, but the one thing you'll notice is he is almost always covered whenever they get him the ball. There's a reason for that. He's not getting himself open, but he's also young. So I wouldn't expect him to be better than Deontay Johnson right now. There's more work that he needs to do, and I would expect him to continue to do it. Hopefully the sulkiness part of his game goes away after a bit, and I get that you're frustrated if that's all that you're getting the ball, but they'll call his number. He'll be in a position to make a play, and you hope that he's able to make it when they do.
Right. So let me talk about the Pickens part for a moment. I think there's an assumption that certain guys can just get out there in a straight line, blow by somebody. You can't do that in the NFL. You have to be able to make a move, whether it's a double, something subtle, just to give yourself that additional step, and then with a burst you can get past somebody. It seems like as a young receiver, he doesn't quite have that.
I'd go a step farther and say he needs to do it, but not even necessarily on the play in question. He needs to show that he can run a slant before a cornerback is going to be worried about a move to the inside. That's where the route running part takes more of an effect. Johnson, when you see Johnson get open, Johnson's like 3 yards open on a lot of fly routes.
Right.
And it's not because Johnson has world-class speed. Mm-hmm. It's not because he's insanely quick. It's because they are so afraid of him, his footwork, him cutting back, him running digs, him running unders, things like that. And he can put a subtle move, and they assume that he's going there, and he's going to get himself open over the top. Pickens doesn't really run much right now. Everyone's going to yell at the offensive coordinator. It's not that simple. You can't call stuff that doesn't work. He's not a video game character. It's not all one and the same. He's got to be able to do it. And if they're not calling him to do it, it's because he's not showing that he can do it. I'd make this comparison. I think we've said this in the past. One thing that got us really excited about Martavis Bryant back in 2015 was the fact that they were calling slants for him, hitches. He was running professional level routes. Mm-hmm. That made him even more dangerous over the top because now it's like, this is not a one-trick pony guy anymore. Mm-hmm. Now he can catch you in a skinny post after 5 yards. you have to be aware of that as a cornerback. That makes it a lot harder to keep that cushion, stay on top of him, and be in position if he breaks. That slows the cornerback down just enough that you can get outside him and go. Pickens doesn't have that yet. Or at the very least, we know that he's not running those routes particularly often. But I will say they're struggling quite a bit to get the ball down the field. It doesn't look to me in all 22 angles, it doesn't look to me like Pickens is really running all that stuff in a way that makes me think they're trying to set something up. That's more of the evolution of his game that needs to take place. And maybe that's, there's still a lot of season left. We'll see, how it goes, but he's far from a finished product. We know that. He's a great athlete, explosive player, long strider, big play type of guy. He's got to develop that smaller game in order to bring everything out.
You had a weekend where there were, 6 essential walk-off games? And some of them involved teams that you didn't think were going to lose and did. How tight is this league right now at this point? I mean, I know there's always going to be a couple of exceptional teams, but how tight in reality is the league now?
I just had a conversation with somebody in the league casually yesterday morning about this, and this is obviously pre-Bills Broncos. The sense in the NFL is not that there are no good teams. It's that the bottom level is kind of the same. The mid-level is expanded.
Yeah.
Those middle group teams are a lot better than they have been in the past. And because of that, nobody's really pulling away. I mean, I think Philadelphia is the top record, right? 8-1.
Yes.
You don't watch Philadelphia and think that this is a world-beating team.
No.
They're not destroying everybody they play.
That's right.
They're a very good football team. They're competing. It's hard to beat Philadelphia. Philadelphia's not walking over anybody either. That's your top level. But at this point, you really don't know where it's going to go. But you have pretty, I think it's fair to say, kind of disappointing starts from Cincinnati, from Buffalo. These are teams that are on national TV often enough that you're noticing that they're not winning these games. The lack of Rodgers is, the worst thing that's happened to primetime football, I think, ever. Jets are constantly on. Therefore, they're always a talking point.
Brutal.
And, good for them and for being what they are, but they're not going to be a great team with the quarterback that they have. I think there's maybe a step below where the Steelers are. The Steelers are a good summation of that mid-level, though. This is a difficult team to beat. They might not beat you, but they can make you beat yourself if you allow them to drag you down to their level, to play the game in the muck, to throw style points out the window. When you have to swing with them, they're going to beat you, and we've seen it several times already this season. On the whole, overall, are they a good football team? It really doesn't look like it. No. But they just make you play their way, and it gets frustrating. I think there are a lot of teams that are like that, and the good teams have not yet overcome that. We're not even sure who it is. I'm not even sure who the best team is from what I've seen to this point. Yeah. Certainly Philadelphia is a quality team. I don't know if they're better than Kansas City. I don't know if they're better than Detroit. That's a team that's also very hard to beat. Right. They can beat themselves, but it's just tougher for an opponent to really knuckle down and take them out over 4 quarters. And it creates, I think, two kind of conflicting narratives. Is one, it's a boring league. Nobody is good. It's not all that great. These are the preconception going into a game. It's a great game if we think the two teams are really good and it comes down to the wire. It's still a mid game if it's two below average teams that go down to the wire. I think it depends on which side of the fence you're on. I personally find NFL football to be, to some degree, good football. Mm-hmm. You watch the Jets play often enough, you'll be able to challenge what I just said pretty easily, and I get that. But top to bottom, I think Denver played pretty well last night. It wasn't Buffalo's best game, but Denver played pretty well. You got to tip your cap to them and say, just because they're not particularly good doesn't mean they're incapable of playing well here and there on a 17-game season. This isn't college. When you get Penn State versus directional state, Penn State's going to beat them by 30 most of the time, and the other times they're going to win by 15.
Right.
You know, it's not like that in the NFL. They're much more balanced. The mid-level is a lot closer to the top than people think that they are. You know, it's a couple plays every game make a difference, and some teams make those plays and some teams don't. But I just think it's the rise and the proliferation of the middle class of the NFL right now. They're stealing wins from the what we think to be the upper class, probably a bit more often than they have in the past.
Without Aaron Rodgers, I feel like the Jets, this is a waste of a terrific defense. I just feel like it's a waste of a terrific defense based on how they play offense.
But Robert Saleh is such a great coach. He's got them
Yes.
going
Yeah.
all the time, regardless of, I mean, it's never good to lose your starting quarterback, but in a way, you'd rather have it happen like in minicamp than you would
Right.
4 plays into the season,
Right.
especially on the national stage in such an emotionally fired up game at home, prime time. Everybody is watching this game. It's just, it was a gut punch. You could see it in Saleh's face. He's not going to tell you that had to be just rough to get through the rest of that game. And they came back and won. That was a great football game. They're playing high level defensive football. Go back to the last question too. I might even argue that, maybe we're seeing better defensive football being played. Jim Schwartz has done a phenomenal job in Cleveland. He probably caught one in the chin from Baltimore this past week, but we've seen them play at high level for 2-3 quarters every game, it seems like. And the Jets are the same way. How do they get 4 wins out of completely substandard quarterback play? How are they doing that? That's how effective defensive football seems to be this season. And, those are definitely 2 of the top defenses. They might not even be the best defense, either one of them. A lot of teams are playing really good defense, and you're seeing great individual seasons from a lot of players as well. So I would imagine, you can't fire Saleh after this season. And, every day it's Aaron Rodgers throwing more rhetoric out there about how he's going to play. I don't know whether he'll play or not, but if they had Aaron Rodgers performing even at the level that he was last season, which I didn't feel was particularly good,
Right.
you have a real tough time beating them. It's like if they get into the playoffs with Rodgers, watch out. That's not a team you want to play.
No. Always a pleasure, even if it is, I'm here, I just walked in.
As always, the pleasure is mine. I hope you guys have a good day.